lemons in the sky, and the oranges in the sea.
Writing on Air from East Leeds FM.
Hello and welcome to Writing on Air, the third day, and we're coming up to the 27th in 28 events that we've had over this last 3 days. It's been a lovely time. We've had some wonderful and very varied events here at Chapel FM, which is what we like. In a minute, we've got Yaffle Poets performing some poetry for you. But later on, there's a really lovely thing happening, which is Tower of Song at 8:30. That is an open event. You come down if you're thinking you want something to do tonight and you live locally or wherever you live. You can drive from Loughborough if you like, if you get here in time. It's going to be an evening of song because a songwriting workshop is going on downstairs at the moment with Tower of Song artists Carl Flattery and Nicky Bray. They're bringing their songwriters here tonight and they're doing songs on the theme of vision for a couple of hours at the last event of Writing on Air today. And just before that, we've got It's a Miracle, which is not an audience event, but do listen in. It's a really beautiful short story by Neil Rathmore, performed by Pam Wilson. I won't say too much about it. It's a real jewel of a piece. But in the meantime, let's hear it for Yaffle.
Good evening, and it's great to be back at the chapel with Yaffle Poets. We were here 2 years ago in that innocent time when events like this seemed perfectly natural. But it's fantastic to be back in this lovely space again. And we've got 4 Yaffle Poets tonight. My name's Mike Farron. I'm one of the publishing team, one of the editors. And we're going to open tonight with a poet that we were really delighted to publish last year. Sadly, it was just before the pandemic hit, so his book, Small Havocs, hasn't perhaps had quite the publicity that we would have liked it to have, but it's a fantastic collection, and we're hoping that maybe next year there's going to be another collection from Matt Nicholson. Matt's one of those poets who makes a nonsense of the divide between performance and page poetry, as you're about to hear. He's published 2 books before Small Havocs with King's England, was it? And we're really looking forward to hearing him tonight and to having more poetry from his forthcoming collection. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to start off gently with a poem that is seemingly about lighthouses and lighthouse keepers. It's called Light at the Edge of the World. It takes both of us to pull the door open before I follow her up to the light room, climbing what appears to be 1,000 spiral steps. At the top, leaning on a bent rail worn by old hands, I'm breathing hard like a Fleet Street runner as I ask what's happened to the lighthouse keepers. We're automated these days. A man comes by annually to clean. She tidies sun-curled leaflets in their cracked plastic rack. The bulbs are state-of-the-art, she says, so the machine does 1 long burst and 3 short flashes, just as we've always done. I ask again, what's happened to the lighthouse keepers? I'd like to do a story for you now. It is still sort of a poem, I believe. I'm not good at all that technical stuff, but this is a poem called I Met Him at a Counter-Demonstration as the police corralled us in an alley 2 streets away from where the plastic fascists marched in unruly columns, making no sense and doing so loudly. He caught me catching his eye because he looked the very spit of a lad I'd been to school with. I looked away, but he came over in his odd brown suit and parka, his frayed black Converse boots. Sharing my cheese and pickle, we talked for hours that day. Between the chants and protest songs, he showed me photos of his boy and the wife who's cut all ties. As the hours dragged on, he seemed to come alive. Could be worse, he said, as I sat on the tarmac soothing my feet. Could be bombing our villages like in Syria or Sarajevo. He laughed as I swallowed my reply, offered me a hand to stand, and when the police let us move, I asked if he needed a lift. I don't have far to go, he said. And when I turned to say goodbye, to make some joke about being kettled, he was lifting cardboard in a doorway, making sure his sleeping bag was dry. Thank you. This was a poem I was asked to write about something I wanted to do once lockdown was over, if indeed it ever is over. This is a poem called A Dream of a Day in a Gallery. I want to stare at shapes and shades and composition, faces painted alone and in relative position. I want to wonder at the palette, the height and width and scale, and if that random splat of turquoise paint really is the essence of a whale. I want to grumble, what the fuck is that? A child could have drawn it better. I want to run wild with the excited crowd, exhume Mary Whitehouse, then upset her. I want to exit through the gift shop, and I'll be more than happy to queue. If I could spend a day as if I understand art, probably not seen for 35 years. This is a poem called We Had One Fight. There's a version of you on your rally arena, cresting the flyover at pace. Another, the recalled silhouette of you, throwing stones to make echoes under the bridge. Then there's the chemical waft of Vosine in my memory of you at the railway embankment, where you stood stone still in fear while that Labrador pissed on your jeans. In the summer of 1980, we invaded the playing fields daily with a football in cricket season. And I know as a fact the date you were born, 8 days after me. And the story of your dad stung by a wasp stuck in his trouser leg as he flew down the new bypass. I can recite your brothers' names, where your grandma lived and how she died. The scar on your other cheek matches a scale model of my fist. Soz. So this next poem is a poem about an operation that I had as a child. This is called Said Big Me to Little Me. Yes, that is you, splayed like a bearskin rug, like an experimental frog face down on the table. And yes, that is the sound of heart monitors and metal on metal and metal slicing flesh. And that is a man's hand inside your ribs, access gained by cutting a slit from your shoulder to halfway down your back. The nurse said it would look like a shark bite when you're older. So in a moment, he's going to collapse your lung to make room so he can cut a piece from your aorta. And if you remember the drawing he showed us yesterday, he'll need to stop your heart just for a minute so he can sew the ends back together. No, don't try to open your eyes. Promise me. No, I don't know why you can feel any of this. All I can do is tell you that one day when you are 48 years old, another man, just as clever as the one inside your ribs, will talk to you about all of this. And I promise it will stop hurting. Thank you. This next poem's an older one, and this was written after a stroll around an allotment with an anarchist, as you do. And this is a poem about passage of time and priorities, and this is called An Allotment of Minutes. There is a man here working a walled garden. Turning the soil, he makes decisions about the weeds, about what is fit for compost to grow better weeds next year. He fights the kettle in his shed, and he conjures unpottable tea as he remarks upon you and me under rusting screw-thread breath that we are the wasters of days, trespassing on his hours. And the blister on his spade hand is at that point in its journey where it might harden to a callus or burst like an angry star. Pausing, he spits into his ringing palms, rubbing filthy hands together. By noon, when the birds sleep, he's forgotten about us watching. He is lost in a version of this world that he governs as best he can. Executing febrile plans, he makes an ally of the rain. And his day, this old man working, unlike ours, the wasters watching, will end up with an aching back and a tale of unused time. Thank you. This next poem is the first poem in Small Havocs, which was my first Yaffle book that came out last year, as Mike said. And this is a secular prayer for the godless amongst you. This is called Cerebellum. Teach me to draw, to poach eggs, to bring a streak-free shine to every mirror in the house. Then teach me to swim, bare beneath the rush hour bridge, to dive down to the cloying riverbed where all the discarded pistols lie. And if there is time, on any given Sunday, teach me to be emancipated, to be satisfied, like Einstein in a garden shed. So I think it's a given that if you're not thinking about or writing about the environment at some point in time, you're really not paying attention. So this is my eco-rant. This is called Said Mother Earth. Said Mother Earth, I'm going blind willfully to avoid seeing the colours bleed out, the edges blur and blunt and soften, the light too often changed for darkness. I'm going blind on purpose. No eyes will ever see anything as beautiful as the girl by the river naming flies on a seagull's corpse. I'm going blind by choice. I want a sense of smell turned to 11, so I might inhale the end of days and detect every atom of humanity on my soft mucous membranes, and in my throat like tea leaves, on my epiglottis as the same dust the watchman cleans with a brush from the workings of the timepiece. Thank you. So I'm going to finish with a couple of short ones from Small Havocs. This next one is about the legacy we leave behind. My considered imprint, a finger smear on this smashed glass planet, an enigmatic aura in an overcrowded room. There will be no fossils to descend from me, no wax recordings that will speak of you. All I can do is post these words on rented billboards in dark alleyways, paste them to the windows of bungalows in cul-de-sacs, where no blue plaque will commemorate this havoc in my heart. And then this is my last poem, and this is kind of about a certain kind of love. This is called Warmth. She puts her hand on the radiator every time she passes by. I hear it from all the way upstairs. When her wedding ring taps against the glossed metal, the sound of it makes me smile. She is never really cold, not really. She just fears that one day she might be, and she is not prepared for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Powerful, tender, spine-tingling. It's all the things you want from poetry. Great, thank you. Next up, we have Kathleen Strafford. Kathleen's collection, Wilderness of Skin, was one of the first collections to be published by Yaffle. She previously published with Dempsey and Windle. I've known Kathleen since I first started out reading poems in West Yorkshire. I've known her as a very distinctive voice, not just because of her Ohio accent among the West Yorkshire voices, but also because of the perspective from which she writes, that wildness, that rock and roll perspective, and that perspective from the other side of the Atlantic. So, Kathleen Strafford.
Thank you, Mike, for that introduction. That was very kind. My first poem is it's called Peter and Catherine from Russia, November 1724. And Peter found his wife Catherine unfaithful, and to punish her, he cut off her lover's head and decided to put it in a pickle jar and made her sleep next to it. So that was so I thought, well, I'll just turn that around for poor Catherine. Sometimes late at night, William speaks, vinegar words bubble his jellyfish mouth. Catherine's fingers touch the glass, close as a kiss. William blinks, rolls his ear towards her hand. His handsome face must be a trick of spirits, a prophet of moonshine. She wants to stop these ill-breeding thoughts of unfolding his tongue, just to taste it again. And now all the blood is gone, wonders how ripe it is. She loosens her hair as he serpentines this jar. Catherine tells Peter, "Come inside." He takes her from behind, a chore he endures. She throws her glazed glass nave a knowing grin, digging her nails, measures humps and grunts, the minuet in her head, his toes remembering to point to her floating partner. She watches blue lips tip upward, nose flat against the glass, eyes half open, vibrating, pickled features bobbing. Catherine laughs at her lover, splashing across the bed. Peter rolls over and says, "Go ahead, I dare you. Laugh your head off." This one's called Rock and Roll 1963. I'm from a place called Salem, Ohio, and it's a tribute to Alan Freed, who coined the phrase rock and roll and started the first concert in Cleveland, Ohio. He was a radio DJ. Every time I close my eyes, I feel it, shaking dreams back into my hair, remembering bell-bottoms and miniskirts and how to stack a spinning arsenal of never-ending 45s. Alan Freed lit the match to this explosion of sound, Johnny and the uncalled-for to open doorways, breaking free at the hop. It wasn't a fad, it was plaster-caster mad. It was fresh, hip, crazy man. Shooting wannabe stars, bought amps, drums, electric guitars, practiced Louie in garages for days, let their hair grow wild, itching to sign autographs on soft-skinned groupies. The glass harp, the human beings, and Biggie Rat were thirsty, not for Ozzie Harriet, Kool-Aid, or Perry Comatose wine, but the Jack Daniels of rock and roll. We all drank till we were drenched in chords, drunk in love, cool as fuck, doing the twist, the swim, the hippie shake. Our lyrics thundered ground lightning like galloping wild horses, impossible to slow or turn down. Ed Sullivan introducing the Animals, the Beatles, the Stones. We inhaled this music, held it in our lungs for as long as we could, flying high as Keith Moon, flowers singing in our hair until we breathed and breathed and breathed in everything. Thank you. This is a true story. Wedding ring. I enjoyed Matt's wedding ring with the on the register. I call it a register. But that was a really nice poem. This is a wedding ring that I lost one time. At first, she panics, bulldozing the snow with her hands, but soon realizes this is a good way to lose it. A blinding chill pressed its face to hers, fingers rubbing small sections, its wintry grip holding tight to her ring. Her knees brittle stiff sposh for hours. The snow refuses to give it back. She's going mad, staring into star-crossed signs in the street, realizing nothing is everything. Oh, why did she pose in that striped dress against the brick wall? How the wind blew her skirt, how she warmed his hands, how she stared as she slept. But now, in the pallid moonlight, the lines of her face are hard and rude. If she listens to the streetlight's warning to change, she could do it now. But because she's a fool, their words are full of slushy holes, for now the world is head over heels in love with snowflakes and secrets. The truth is golden, lost in the bank of snow. It isn't fair. All she can't bear leaves with that sudden rush, all this caffeinated nonsense, these clandestine cafes. This something like a fever and rehearsed apologies is on the edge of boredom, down on its knees, paying the ransom of winter madness. Yeah. This is called Feeling All Right with Joe Cocker. Singing the Mad Dog Blues, Joe's body flails and contorts as if playing guitar, piano, and drums all at once. Raspy vocals pass through steel cities, slag and flume, wooing lovers, distorting the room, until the ceiling gives way, becomes a crow flying where no one can escape its sorrow, jazz or booze, knocked out his teeth, ripping out his throat. Don't ask for how many times he's wailed a tormenting mating call, howling, rutting, naked in Delta's garden, screaming, "The world is alive. Hold on for the ride. I'm taking you with me." The next few poems are from my coming pamphlet called Dr. Cooney's Sideshow, Everyone Loves a Baby. Dr. Cooney was a doctor from 1900 to 1940 in New York, where the medical profession wasn't quite ready to accept incubators. And so he took the incubators and put them in a sideshow, charged people to see tiny babies, and didn't charge parents anything, just charged like 25 cents to see the babies, and he saved over 8,000 babies' lives. So this is, my whole pamphlet is dedicated to him, and this is the first one called The Hat Box. Dr. Cooney's first USA exhibition. In Dreamland, Martin welcomes passers-by standing by his sign, incubators with living infants, who only ask directions to the Wild West show or stop to gawk at the nude French painting next door. A man with rough hands, bow tie, and wide eyes appears carrying a hat box. Can I please speak to Dr. Cooney? The doc thinks he's a salesman and says, sorry, he's gone home for the night. So for the rest of the day, the man watches cowboys shoot out Indians swinging tomahawks in honor of President McKinley's arrival, and after the savages are slaughtered, enjoys the Wonder Wheel, Ferris wheel, and mechanical steel steeple race. At 8 a.m., the disheveled man returns, asking Dr. Cooney if he could please speak to Dr. Cooney. Sorry, I was closing yesterday. Yes, I'm the doctor. And he says, my wife gave birth yesterday. It came a month early. I slept in the park. I did the best I could. Martin opens the hat box. With one hand, lifts the cloth bundle stained with vernix, dips the half-alive infant into cold bath, and the babe starts to breathe. Thank you. This is the tattooed lady. 1905. Hurry, 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 step right up. After grinning at the midgets in Midget City and being entertained at the burlesque show, the tattooed lady pays 25 cents to see the pretty preemies and incubators. Each baby at intervals is cuddled and wet nursed in private. She leans in, narrows her gaze. Fingers begin to tremble with memories of transparent skin. Curled tiny fingers with feet planted. She doesn't speak of panic, but marvels at tiny faces, eyes still knitted, little hands reaching with wedding ring wrists, lips puckering, her eyes glimmering. She whispers, "Please, God, please do not let these lost lullabies be thrown out like yesterday's news." She has no pictures of adorable offspring. Dare she give them a soft place to land? These sweet faces and hands reaching out into an unforgiving world, she will be painted over spreads of her skin. Each prick of the needle will be a prayer. Never let go of curled fingers. This is what women were told. If the doctor standing next to you never spoke and you were left in limbo, forever dreaming of nothing but its next heartbeat that stopped beating when your hot water museum was empty, your artisan womb's fine art couldn't be saved. At what point didn't you hear a pulse? There you are again, standing on death's doorstep, splashing language's dark water. He said, "By this time tomorrow, it'll be half remembered, but you know you will forever hear its song, and you don't yet feel the cold. Keep this to yourself." Right. And I've got 3 more. Is that okay?
Yep.
That I might see. This is a true story named Catherine Ash Meyer, 1939. Looking skinny as a rail, Ruth swells her vibrating frequency as they signal the Broadway bus. It rolls through streets, tires splash at the curb's edge. Gripping like a muscle, her water breaks. She clings to her husband. It's a drowsy pain, like tightening strings of a cello, radio waves of an incoming tide. The baby is isolated in a deep black barrel, hinged door at the top, like a washing machine coffin. A webbing of hoses, labyrinth to the oxygen tank. Nurses are covered head to toe like gauze-stricken mummies, ghosting out of a sarcophagus to pour formula down throats using tubes and funnel. After 2 weeks, Mr. Ash voices a half-spoken worry. "I'm out of work. I have no means to pay." By a spin of luck, baby Catherine is rushed by ambulance to the World's Fair to be looked after by a team of nurses at Coney Island, a stone's throw away from marauding elephants, a headless living chicken, and a dog-faced boy. Ruth expresses her milk. John delivers it to Dr. Cooney every day. Using their incubator IDs, they hold, cuddle, and feed their child as often as they like. When Catherine's 9 years old, the hospital asks to see her. "We don't understand. Your daughter has perfect sight. All the other babies have gone blind." Right? And this is Lizzie Borden. If you don't know who Lizzie Borden is, she slaughtered her mother and father with an axe. Lizzie holds a sign with the ladies of the Christian Temperance Unit protesting Dr. Cooney's wet nurses drinking stout. It's like giving infants a bottle of beer. It's an abortion of common sense. The sky is forbidding at Coney Island as she strolls the boardwalk, sideshows of the headless woman and the human worm. The headless woman and the human worm set her brain whirling. She pulls at her hair and wanders in a daze, recalls tweezing eyeballs of Fall River rats, splitting them in two, dangling gray bodies by their tails, snipping off each leg, always saving the throat till last, listening for the engine of their last breath. I'm just not meant to be a mother. Alone on the beach she sings, "When I needed the water, the earth was dry. Crushed heads with gray, sludgy veins wash onto shore, axe blades deep in their skulls. A family portrait she cannot erase. She begins to strip off, buries her dress in the sand. And the last one, called Bonnie and Clyde Visit Dr. Cooney's Sideshow. There's a raging stream of cigarettes and liquor down this one-way street, riddled with romance and smuggled arguments, night bubbles like a black kettle and barrows a V8 Ford. She lowers her face, wipes a tear on the blanket's edge, with her spangled beret, reflects the moon, handcuffing morning until dawn is black and blue as their car creeps down the strip. But now the only thing Bonnie cannot keep are negatives of semi-automatics in this poem, pinned to her pink bundle, which they hand to a half-awake nurse. Into her pocket, Clyde slips a $50 bill, nods and tips his fedora. Bonnie rides shotgun as they peel away, spitting dust to continue their bright and cruel celebrity incontinence of violence. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's the kind of unique voice, the kind of rock and roll sensibility that I was talking about, and it's fascinating to hear the material from the new pamphlet. Look forward to that. The next poet we have may be slightly familiar to some people at Chapel FM, but we were delighted to be able to secure Peter Spafford's latest collection after his previous one, Quick. This is a collection that I worked on with him called Frisk, and it was such a pleasure to work on. It was great to have that back and forth of comments as the collection took place. And it was great that it was came out just about the right time, because it was the first the launch was the first live event I'd attended in about 18 months or something. So it'd be great to hear some work from Frisk from Peter Spafford.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, it was a real joy to work with you on the book, and also a joy to be published by Yaffle. So I'm going to read I'm going to read a whole sequence of short poems that comes at the end of the book, and called Full House. And I haven't read any from these before. I've done quite a few readings this month, which has been great, but I haven't read any of these poems. And I'm partly reading these now as a kind of way of for me to find out whether they work as a sequence. I'll just say a little about how this came about with Full House. I read a book it's a graphic novel really, by Linda Barry, which I was put onto by Emma Adams, the playwright. And I was struck by one thing that she says in the book. The thing I call my mind seems to be kind of like a landlord that doesn't really know its tenants. And I really liked that. I thought that was a lovely thing to say, and because I kind of feel like that. So all these poems are sort of snapshots of who is in that room, in this big house of my mind. And some of those people are people from my past, and also sort of recapitulate some of the themes of the book and the people in the book. There's quite a lot of grief in the book, because a few people that are close to me have died in the last few years, including one of my best mates, Meeb. It was interesting hearing Matt's poem about his best mate, and made me think again of this. Meeb died about a few years ago. And my dad, who featured heavily in Quick, he's in there too. But sometimes these are alter egos. I don't know where they came from. I didn't really think about it too much, and I'm disinclined to think about it too much now either. They kind of came out, so I'm going to read them. There's a sequence of 10, so your applause is very much appreciated, but probably wait till the end, because they are, if you are intending to clap, so that gives them a kind of integrity as a 10. Full House. Number 1. Him in the attic, thump, thump, house shakes. Call him Daniel, dumbbells deluxe. The actor prepares for going out Friday, dancing, smiling slow, bringing back a grateful idolater. Number 2. In the ground floor flat, Johnny travels. Maps lounge on his floor. Joburg environments, Bukhara city centre, like stoned backpackers in a hostel, telling their gilded tales of rough nights, trespassed days, encounters with spirit sisters in random bars and cathedral naves. Marseille, Nairobi, Omsk, as Johnny taps on his brand new MacBook under the lamp. Number 3, in the laundry room, on certain nights sacred in the laundry year, the draped clothes leave their horses and dance with each other. The odd sock with the black brassiere, the checked shirt with the scarlet pyjama top, the sad nightie with the royal blue boxers, the whirl, the scuff and ecstasy of it, the stirred up scent of surf, non-bio, all dry in no time at all. Number 4, how they all fit is anyone's guess. Eat, cook, rehearse in one room. Big room, admittedly, mattresses, sleeping bags, plates, forks, what isn't for livings, a prop, swords, lipsticks, takeaway boxes, theatre, life. Then there's the audience, clatter, chatter up bare board stairs to a different play each night, it seems. What they can do, transform into, at the tap of a heel. The old drab room is prairie, heaven, brothel in Northampton. Let them do it, have it, work, love, live together. Die for each other, I reckon. Number 5, Meeb lives in the self-contained which looks out to sea. When I open the door, he's never in the room, but his things are. Long pine desk, flash hi-fi, famous pedal bin. His Les Paul leans on its stand like Lennon against that Hamburg wall. Is that the swish of the shower? I call. Number 6, Elise in the garden annex, green fingers, twist of geranium scent. Elise fears nothing, or nothing she will speak about. Bookshelves stocked with collected poems and sharp DVDs, good northern bastard. Listen to her laughing of an April evening, the clink of a carafe, Elise in her chair, spring in the offing, a half moon of lemon in her cup. Number 7, Dawn pleases herself in her roughed, frilled cushion emporium, Snoopy framed on fairy blue walls, the hairbrush that smells like her mother. By day, a manager, sharp suit, eyebrows. You wouldn't want to know why she's late back to the snug kettle hiss and a deep yawn that is not her own. Number 8, through a glass door, the studio, whitewashed, one round table with an angled poise lamp and lotus on the floor, the meditating monk called Tim. Number 9, beyond by the greenhouse, my father makes a bonfire each afternoon of his cherished garden. There he stands, stares into its blazing moor as behind him the garden blooms and summers in full. What's in the fire? What's in the fire? What holds you there, my dad? But still he goes forth, gathering snaggles of twig branch, cone, building up the pyre. And the last one, number 10. I'm off down the co-op, she hollers through my door. Sarah, 24, in paint-splattered overalls. What they've done to that musty basement. Opened the vents' windows, daubed the stone floor black, and each wall a primary. Listen to them, she and Caris, yelling out, singing. Is it a row or a prelude to sex? But they didn't hesitate. No ifing, butting. Move in together. Why not? Why not anything? Anchovies at midnight, Mozart at dawn, a cat called Macho they rescued as a kitten from the streets of Toulouse or Reading, waitress and chef jobs, a course in beekeeping paid for, postponed, and the odd bits of tack they sell as antiques. Is there anything you need? She shouts through my door, which is always ajar. Nothing, I say. Nothing more. Thank you.
It's kind of house, the kind of poem where all life is there, isn't it? It's like getting a 600-page novel in 10 short sections. But we're so pleased to have published Frisk this year, and it's great to hear that. So I'm going to read some now. I'm going to start with some Yaffle-related poems. My pamphlet, All of the Moons, came out in 2019. This was a collaboration between myself and a composer called Keely Hodgson, who I believe has appeared at Chapel FM as well. And well, unfortunately, it's without the music tonight, but you're just going to have to imagine some of the music. This is the title poem, All of the Moons. All of the useful moons who shared our tasks for eons before we found the words to name our gratitude. All of the feckless moons who blunder into broad daylight and stare it out, unblinking. All of the teenage moons who loiter, crater-faced behind the clouds and listen to the gloomy music of the night. All of the exhibitionist moons who photobomb the sun's limelight, then are escorted from the sky. All of the toenail-clipping moons, lost in the blankets of the night to prick us unexpectedly with their needle-sharp horns. All of the moons that point a fat white finger at us, straight across the belly of the sea that heaves and yearns toward its mate. All of the moons that pulse and breathe and turn a modest face away and waltz and pirouette and wax and wane and teach geometry and tell tall tales and blink in slow-mo and who lead the lupine choir and orchestrate the tides and slide away and take their leave over 100 million years and steal our dreams. One thing that I didn't mention about Kathleen is her association with Runcible Spoon, which is an open mic night. It's now a publishing house, but it's also been a website. And one of my moon poems had an outing on the Runcible Spoon website. It's one of the ones where I came up for the idea of the collection. It's called Huntress Moon. Insouciant with her ownership of everything, the huntress moon stays up past dawn, surrounded by her hounds, the clouds, suffused with pink from heat of chase and satiate bloodlust. I glimpse her nakedness through trees. She sends her gallows birds to flap and hop alongside me and haunt me through the brief, bright day. One of the things that Yaffle got involved with was in 2019 was a project with Bradford City of Film as part of the Bradford Literature Festival. We were commissioned to write a number of poems to perform as part of a walk around Bradford's surprisingly rich film and television history. And beyond the initial poems, we got a bit carried away. Because the history was so rich, we wrote about several aspects of Bradford's film and TV history. And I'd like to read a couple from that collection, which we call Real Bradford. This first one is called Blue Plaque on Brafferton Arbour. It's about Bradford playwright and Andrea Dunbar, whose script was made into the film Rita Sue and Bob 2. It's called Blue Plaque on Brafferton Arbour, and that's a street on the Buttershaw estate. And Max Stafford Clark, the theatre director, visited her there, and there's an epigraph from him. He says, "Pastoral it was not, it was bleak." Families like ours lived in places like this: Buttershaw, Holmwood, Ravenscliffe, Lower Grange, hollowed by factories, mill work and no work, sucked dry by kid after kid after kid, self-medicated by booze, skag and shagging, stuck on a moor where the wind is a bastard and buses don't turn up to take you away. No one gives genius permission to land. It squats where it wants to and does what it has to. No matter you've never seen inside a theatre or picked up a book other than horror fiction, you listen to people and write what they're saying. You look at their lives and reflect it all back. So what if they hate it? You just must not lie. Some of us get out through the love of our parents, some of us by scheming, some of us by chance, some of us by trampling whoever we need to, while some stay behind and hug misery to them, because they think fame and success aren't for their kind, and no one is going to put up a blue plaque on the pink pebble dash of a council house wall. Thank you. And this one is called Milk. It's based on the film Billy Liar from 1973, directed by John Schlesinger. Real life had always been the kitchen sink, the boring parents, crushing pieties of the undertaker's office that you couldn't even get sacked from, and the single ring you shared among the girls you couldn't afford and didn't want to have to choose between. It doesn't matter. When you were the king and hero of the country in your head, and your novel's just 2,000 words a day from being the greatest ever written, you know reality will never measure up, even when it is the woman who was the 60s, even when it's the city you dreamed about and written the script for, even when it's leaving suburbia behind. You always thought you needed love, excitement, freedom and colour. Now you realise that all you needed was 2 pints of milk. For the last couple of years, Yaffle has run a competition, and the best poems in the competition have been published in an anthology called Whirligust, and we've used a little bit of publisher privilege to put some of our own poems in there. And this poem was published in Whirligust 2. It's called The Structure of Proteins. I'm maudlin drunk and talking about God. You're rhetorical drunk and taking the greatest pleasure in extrapolating everything I say to absurdity. And I'm so drunk it doesn't take much. My words are slurred before they reach my tongue. It's easy meat for someone used to sparring with their academic peers. Then, in the pause to fill our glasses, you tell me of a colleague who claims God is the structure of proteins. No, me neither, you say, and the subject drifts. It's only later I need to know just what he meant. Was he claiming that God is proved by the complexity it takes to make a protein, or that proteins build a living world without a deity? I need to talk it through with you, but you're further away than even a non-existent God. And I use that poem as a bridge from the Yaffle poems that I was intending to read to the rest of the second half of the group that I'd selected, because that's a poem that came from my latest pamphlet called Smithereens. Smithereens is about a friendship that lasted 40 years, despite myself and my friend being on opposite sides of the Atlantic. He, as an academic, teaching in Las Vegas, of all places. The next poem is about a trip that I took to visit this friend in Las Vegas. It's called Sandstorm. It was in our eyes, it was up our nose, in our clothes, in food whose smoothest textures were grit. It was in the car making CDs I bought from Big B's, Skip Their Beat. They said it was the worst for 50 years. It was the first that I had seen. It might have been just like that every day. It was in the malls, in the slot arcades, in the roulette wheels, in the packs of cards as soon as they were cut. In Luxor, in Paris, on pirate ships, in fountains, in gondolas, all down the strip, reddening eyes, scouring skin, bringing the dry, unquenchable desert to drink in the green and lonely springs of the meadows. And this brings the friendship back home, to not too far at all from here. This poem is called Fewston. These days are as calm, serene, and infinite as the early autumn sky reflected in the unruffled water of the reservoir. Almost every story I can tell her she hasn't heard before, and almost all their narratives point toward a happy end. And as if there aren't enough already, we steal fragments of sentences we hear from strangers in the instant they pass by and make them meaningful by making them ours. Smooth out the tensions they express or magnify their little happiness. And I talk about you, the friend she hasn't met and won't for years because you were so far away. About the gilded summer night we sat here, just us two, with cans of beer and planned the legend of our future lives, not thinking to factor in the world's resistance to plans and everything that could go wrong and will, but hasn't yet for me and her, on a day so calm, serene, and infinite. Thank you. And this is the final poem. It's in memory of my friend who died in 2017. It's called Leaving Las Vegas. This leaving doesn't go through Hollywood. This leaving isn't eased by A-list charm from Nick Cage, nor a whore with heart of gold, routine from Shoe. This leaving isn't strange and wonderful as meadows in a desert, as Paris next to Luxor, next to Venice. This leaving's not a dream of infinite wealth cast from fortune's wheel. This leaving's not a 24-hour twilight feeding coins directly to casino owners' pockets. This leaving is the weight of history, turned to a burden that cannot be shared with students too intent on mobile phones' endless porn feeds. This leaving's idiocy of minds so much enfeebled they can vote for reality TV stars. This leaving's the TV that brings the madness to your world each night. This leaving is a home that never was, a world away from what was once a home and friends who faintly stir in memory. This leaving is the child you never knew. This leaving is the bottle which provides relief from pain and a soft focus to your nights and then your days, then your whole life, which swells your liver, shakes your limbs until time is abolished and your heart can stop. Thank you. I'd just like to finish with two short poems. The first is a poem that has just been published. I received a copy of the book yesterday in an anthology called Lighting Out, which is published by Beautiful Dragons Press, with whom Yaffle have collaborated on a project in the past. Bloody amazing. This poem is called Evening, February. Never before or since a sliver of evening this thin, this separate and separating, like the edge of a knife that is the idea of knife, of sharpness, the nowness of it, the integrity, not a part of day or night, but a thing entirely itself, that I know should be a daily recurrence, but whose boundaries stand clear at no other time but now and here, this one and only evening that you and I will ever need and will never have again. And finally, I'm afraid, another poem of loss. The poems in Smithereens were poems of loss. A good friend of mine died over the summer, and she was called Jenny Dixon. She was a member of a group that I'm also part of. And I just had this poem accepted for publication called Pennine Platform, whose editor Julia Deakin quite frequently comes into Chapel FM to talk about the latest issue. This poem is called Tai Chi for Jenny Dixon. You were doing Tai Chi in the park in your poem, another place, another time. But I think about you in this park, where 6 or 7 women halfway between your age and mine are led as gracefully as they're able through movements named for rooster, sparrow, crane. Your mind, which couldn't help but to observe, roamed over toddlers, screaming swifts, and ducks that foraged duckishly, a word that you alone could coin. And here I find my own attention dragged by every passing thing away from the gentle silence of the group doing Tai Chi. A delivery driver dad checks his schedule as he swings his child. A youth in front of the empty bandstand rocks back and forth, I guess, in prayer, until he mounts his quad bike, revs it round the park, ripping the turf and shattering the peace. Perhaps their earnest effort makes the chi flow from the earth up through their bodies while you are casting off your rootedness. I think of how you end your poem on the white crane's spreading wings, and I imagine you ready to fly. Thank you.
And a round of applause for Yaffle, please, and for the independent presses of the world.